Hey, Steve Sparky, Fifer, 1250 AM, The Fan, here with you. Follow me on Twitter at Sparky Radio. Nathan Marzion, like usual, over there. Follow him at Nathan Marzion. Special guest this week. He's the best. Eric Nehm, Bucks beat writer for The Athletic. Follow him on Twitter at Eric_Nehm. Eric, thanks for taking some time for Green and Growing, which you can download on your Odyssey app, wherever you download your podcast at. Also on the Odyssey Sports YouTube page, where we are currently live streaming, like we do all of our podcasts live streaming at. Eric, let's start here. Before we started, a good old boy, Nathan Marzion, never misses a moment and says, happy Game 6 anniversary, obviously from the NBA Finals a couple of years ago. We had Ted Davis on, the Bucks play-by-play announcer, former Bucks play-by-play announcer, last podcast. That was amazing. We went down memory lane with him throughout the playoffs, the regular season, how that whole thing played out. What stands out to you? I mean, obviously you had the huge Giannis interview after and all of that. I remember that. But as far as from your standpoint, for people that don't know Eric or didn't know Eric before he became famous, I did. Eric Nehm was like one of the biggest Bucks fans in the world prior to landing the gig and then getting to see, I'm sure now it's not your favorite team, right? You can't root for anybody, BS. But getting to see the team that you grew up watching win a championship has to be pretty sweet.
I mean, the thing that sticks out is they did it, right? Like that was the whole thing. You had the team get good, win 60 games, and you're just thinking, well, if that team couldn't win a championship, they're too young. And then you have the bubble happen, and it's like, well, maybe that was a fluke last year. Who knows? And now I think with having the last 2 years after it, you think about like, oh, it actually is really hard. What they did that year, they won a championship, and everyone starts thinking about dynasty and back-to-back and kind of how all this stuff works. The last 2 years have been a pretty harsh reminder of this stuff is really hard. Like, you need to get pretty lucky during that. And if you don't have Chris Middleton or you don't have Giannis for half of the playoff run that you're in any year, it's going to be really hard, and you're probably not going to do it. And to me, like, that's the thing now that I think in the moment, obviously there were like a number of things, like Giannis going down, the Bucks losing game 5 in Brooklyn, like all of those things made you think like, yeah, that was pretty hard. But I don't think you really like comprehended until the last 2 years happened, where they have another team that's stacked, that's ready to make a big run, and then one thing goes wrong, and all of a sudden they don't do it. So to me, I think that's the thing that sticks out to me, is that like, no matter what, that flag is still going to fly, that banner is still going to be hanging up in Fifer Forum or whatever that arena is called 30 years from now. Like whatever it is, it's going to exist. It's not going anywhere. It happened. It was incredibly difficult. And it happened. That's what sticks out to me, is that it actually happened, because I honestly never thought, as someone who grew up in the state of Wisconsin, I was going to see a Bucks championship.
Me either.
I saw one happen, and you can't take it away.
Yeah, Eric, great to have you on, and appreciate everything you do for the Bucks community. I wanted to ask, what moment did you really start to think like they're going to win, or not that, because we didn't know for sure. There were so many ups and downs, but when you really started to believe that they could win the title, because we asked Ted Davis, he kind of said game 7 against Brooklyn. I feel like for most people, it's either game 7 against Brooklyn or it's, game 4 or 5 of the finals, when people really started to be like, oh my gosh, they're actually going to do this. I just want to get your take on that.
The steel alley-oop. That's the moment. To me,
Eric's been a negative guy most of his life, though. Let's be honest, that's part of it. I'm just joking around.
I am always a pessimist, and I am always thinking about like the worst possible thing.
Hey, never trust the Bucks, right? Never trust the Bucks.
Hey, rules are rules. Rules are
right.
Rules. That was the number one rule with the Milwaukee Bucks for so long. And yeah, I mean, I truly didn't. You think back to the start of that finals, and there was a clip going around on Twitter sometime in the last 24 hours that was showing the Suns offense moving the ball around. And at the same time, I was marveling at the Bucks defense at the time and how quick they could move. But that happened in game 2, that possession that went around. Game 2, right before halftime, the Bucks were making a run. And then that happens where the Suns make 10 passes in a possession. The Bucks defend it perfectly. And then at the end, there's still an and one. And I just remember after those first 2 games thinking like, they have nothing for the Suns. Like, what are they going to do? How are they going to get out of that? Because the Suns are running them ragged. Like, they can't defend them. It's not going to work. And then obviously you have game 3 and you have the big shots and the big block in game 4. So you're able to like then start to believe it a little bit. But to me, it never seemed like it was actually going to happen until Drew steals the ball, throws the alley-oop, Giannis dunks, that whole arena goes silent. That to me was the moment where I was like, okay, they can do this thing. And honestly, once they got to Milwaukee, I remember talking to Sam Amick, our national writer, and being like, all right, so what did you book for the hotel in Phoenix? And he was like, you actually think we're going back? And I was like, you know, you always have to like think about the possibilities and like what could happen. He was like, no, I think they're going to win. And I was like, I'm not quite there yet. Like I've seen them have these ups and downs. Like the worst thing could always happen. Like this is written too perfectly. Like it can't actually be Bucks in 6. Like there's got to be one more like bump in the road, and maybe it won't ever happen. Maybe they'll lose both these games and never win. But I was like, it can't be. So maybe never. But I would say I think the steal and the alley-oop was when I actually felt like, okay, this could happen.
Yeah, I remember thinking the exact same thing, like going into game 6. I'm like, it would be the most Bucks thing ever for them to lose this game. And we're going back to a game 7, and it's like, oh my God, we had it right there. And even after that second quarter was awful in game 6, and it was like, here we go. Like, of course, it's going to be a grind. You know, they were up 20 in the first quarter. Of course, it can't be that easy. Right. But Sparky, what are your thoughts on that? I wanted to ask you too, like, were you games? Because for me, I think, honestly, I really started to believe like they can do this after game 7 against Brooklyn. I was like, this might be it. Like this was the hurdle to get over to get to the finals. And, you know, I did think we were better than anyone in the West. But obviously then Giannis goes down, and then the first 2 games, like there's plenty of stuff then to all of a sudden bring you back down to reality after that. But in the moment, I would probably say game 7 against Brooklyn was my moment. I don't know about you, Sparky.
For me, I think it was once they got through the Nets after everybody wanted Bud fired, like in the middle of the series, just fire Bud and let's anybody on the bench coach this team. They're going to lose the series otherwise.
By the way, everybody includes the organization. Like, let's be clear about that. Like the organization was there too. So it wasn't just like fans who were like, let's get rid of this guy.
Well, the TNT guys were leading the charge on this thing nationally. I mean,
it was everybody.
Eric, you've watched basketball a long time, just like Nathan and I. I can never remember an NBA head coach being under fire from that specific show that much in one playoff series. Game in, game out, game in, game out. They were just killing this dude. I'm like, if he comes through this, I mean, he can come through anything at this point. But when they get through that and Philly's gone, I'm going, okay. Because I was scared of getting your butt kicked in Brooklyn. If you survive, then you got to go to another physical series. They're gone. Here's Atlanta. Right. I'm like, okay, well, this is possible. I think they can make a run. Phoenix really never concerned me necessarily. You know, you lose a game 1 to everybody in that playoff series, so I really wasn't worried even at that point of that series. But I think once they got past Brooklyn and I saw Philly wasn't there, that's when I was like, okay, they might do this. And nobody, there's one person that is happier than Nathan Marzion that the Bucks won a championship, happier than Eric Nehm that the Bucks won a championship, and happier than me, Steve Sparky Fifer, that the Bucks won a championship that year. Do we know who this is? Brandon freaking Jennings. Nobody made out more than Brandon Jennings with a Bucks in 6. The dude got to be in the parade. Now he's doing this whole tough crowd clothing line, the whole deal. Like, he reinvented himself off of Bucks in 6 for that whole run. Like, nobody was happier that they finished the deal than Brandon Jennings, Eric Nehm.
Yeah, I mean, it could not have worked out better. And honestly, I have always wondered what people on the outside thought of this. Like, if you're in Milwaukee, you get it. Like, you're like, okay, yeah, you know, like there's like this false bravado, this like idea that like, oh yeah, you know, we can beat anyone, blah blah blah, like all this stuff. But if you're on the outside, you have to be thinking, why do they like this? Like, why do they believe in this man who said this sorry Bucks team was going to beat the Heatles? Like, why does anyone like him in the city? And here, everyone in Milwaukee is like, he's the prophet. He knows.
Hero.
Yep. Like, I truly do. That is one thing that I end up like looking back on this. I mean, like, I wonder what people actually think, like on the outside of everyone in Milwaukee being like, that's the prophet right there, Brandon Jennings.
And it's funny because I remember even some people that like, they are Bucks fans, but they didn't really follow the team closely until they were in the finals and everything. And those people were like, I talked to them, even like a year later, and I would be talking about Bucks in 6, and they're like, yeah, where did that even come from? And I'm like, you don't know where that came from? Like, that was Brandon Jennings, man. And it was just like, it's funny because even the people that aren't necessarily like, they weren't following the team back then, and even them kind of just, they think it just kind of happened out of nowhere. And I'm like, no, this started in like 2013. Like, this has been a thing for like a decade. I just want to quick talk again about I was going to say in that Brooklyn series. First off, it's so funny. I remember back when Charles Barkley would be like, every game, he's like, they're the biggest bunch of idiots, but they're going to win the finals, but they are the biggest bunch of idiots. And I'm like, that's so true. Like, it's exactly how everyone feels about them. But that game 7, thinking about how much swung on that, and like Bud's Bud's gone if they lose that. Drew Holiday, that trade looks like a big mistake if they lose that, because he struggled up until the very closing minutes of that game. And obviously then Durant's moving on. Durant might have another ring at this point. It just so much changed on that one game, and it's like I always think back to that game as like that was honestly just the craziest moment of the whole playoffs to me. Was that one game and just how much it swung everything. And then obviously it leads to them getting to the finals, and then those crazy finals games. Eric, which was your favorite moment of the playoffs there? Game 7 in Brooklyn, Game 5, the steal and oop, the block, Game 6, 50-piece. There's so many moments to pick from, but if you had to pick one.
I mean, so I've had this conversation a number of times after that playoff run. I've told people I think maybe the best basketball I've ever seen played was Bucks Nets in that series. Like when Durant hit God level, yeah. There was nothing anyone could do. Like the Bucks were doing everything. PJ Tucker was playing football against him, and it was just like, well, I'm going to put 50 on your head. And it was so difficult to comprehend what he was doing and how he was able to do it, that's one thing that really sticks with me. But that's like not a moment. That's just like a general feeling and a general awe of, oh my gosh, this guy has reached a plane of existence I didn't know was possible on an NBA basketball court. And the Bucks beat that dude. So like, then you're starting to think like, okay, that must mean like they're doing something special. So to me, I wrote it the night of, but Giannis's block in Game 4 just continues to blow my mind, because as I wrote in my story, he defended the alley and the oop in a single play, both of them. He defended the alley, he forced the pass, and then he went and blocked the dunk that should have put him in no man's land. And he did it jumping off the leg that I thought was broken a week earlier. So like, to me, like if we're talking specific moment, obviously I as I told you, like the steal in the alley-oop was the moment I felt like it was real. But to me, the moment that I just could not believe was that block. It defies logic that a single man can defend both the alley and the oop against a team that had been beating teams with that throughout the postseason. Like, you're looking at Devin Booker. He made the perfect read. He throws a perfect pass. DeAndre Ayton doesn't fumble the pass. He doesn't stumble on his way to the rim. Nothing. It's literally just going to be a two-hand dunk, and Giannis somehow turns all the way around, gets to it before it gets to the rim, avoids a goal set, all of that. To me, that's the moment that is just like, if you're talking about where the pantheon of basketball exists, like that's right up there. And I know we at The Athletic wrote that night, and Pat Connaughton talked about it on stage after the game, was like, is that better than the LeBron chase down in Game 7 against the Warriors? Like, if we're talking about the greatest finals block of all time, and like, if we're talking degree of difficulty, yes, it obviously is better than that one. Moment, I understand, is like a minute and a half left in Game 7, so maybe you can give the edge to LeBron there. But like, we're talking greatest defensive plays ever made. That's right there in the conversation.
I'll interject and say, if we're talking moment, for me, the moment that I found out Giannis could still play in the playoffs, for me, because when he went down, I remember doing post-game show on SSP going, Yeah, dude. I mean, there's just no way. Even if it's just a severe sprain, he's not going to be back in time for the finals. I mean, we're in the conference championship. There's no way he's coming back. And all I was worried about is if this is severe, we're going to miss all of next year. So this is just going to be a complete waste of a season next year. Yeah, they may be a 7 seed or a 6 seed, but you're going to waste a whole year of Giannis. I don't know anybody that saw that and said, "Oh yeah, he'll be good for the finals if they get there." Like, I don't know anybody. And when Ted Davis was on, he was like, I went in the next day expecting to hear he was done.
Yeah.
I mean, could you believe that he was able to play that in that quick of a turnaround?
I mean, we're reporters, right? So like we're looking for the confirmation of, sprained knee, torn this, like torn that. And like it kept coming back empty. Like you would talk to people and they're like, no, it's just a sprain. And it was like, I saw the play.
It's a picture of him with his leg bent the wrong way.
Like that, it was not just a sprain. His leg almost fell off. Like there's no way that it's just a sprain. So yeah, I mean, it truly is just unbelievable. And you think back to that game 1 in Phoenix, and like I remember the story I wrote after the game was like, yeah, it didn't go well. Phoenix played great, but Giannis played. And he made like a chase down block and he scored 20 points. Like nothing else matters. Like he played, he doesn't look like himself, but he looks somewhat similar to himself. At moments he could look like that. The Bucks have a chance. Like that was my game 1 takeaway of the NBA finals, in a game where like it didn't really feel competitive at any moment, but you still thought, okay, there's a chance. Like he's on the floor and he played.
And then immediately in game 2, we had 40, and it was like Chris and Drew were awful in that game. And I'm like, well, we were kind of close, and like they sucked, and Giannis is playing on one leg and we still were close. Like that kind of was like, okay, maybe Giannis can still carry us in this thing.
And I was going to say too, like speaking to like the confidence of those two, as I told you, I was getting ready to leave Phoenix, write my story and be like, I don't know how the Bucks do anything against them. And as I'm phrasing questions to Chris and Drew, who took the podium together that night, they're just laughing, having a good time in my questions. And I was like, is this not the NBA finals? Am I tripping right now? Like, am I somewhere where like the games didn't count in Phoenix? Like, how are you guys so confident? And like, to their credit, they had a lot of confidence in like what they were going to do, the adjustments that they were going to make. And obviously that's something that they had done throughout the playoffs, like start off a series kind of crummy and then find their way out. So like, I understand why they could, maybe feel confident, but in the moment I was like, yo, this is the NBA finals. Like it doesn't seem like a laughing matter, but credit to those guys. Like they just had the confidence to go out there and come back and win the team's first championship in 50 seasons.
Yeah, that picture that turned into a meme, it was like, there's just like, it just says Suns lead 2-0, and you've got Chris and Drew just laughing, and then everyone's like, oh, it worked out. When they did win, I wanted to ask, was there, like, how surreal was it for you? Because I remember for me, I was like, I almost like couldn't get fully emotional in the moment, because I was like, it doesn't even feel real. Like it hasn't even hit me yet. It took me like 3 days for it to actually sink in. Like they are actually the champs, and like Giannis actually had 50. Because as you said, it kind of felt too perfect. It felt like they really won in 6, and Giannis had exactly 50 points, and they won the title. And so, did it feel real to you in the moment, or did it take a few days for it to really sink in?
I mean, I think the parade was when it hit, for me, to like actually believe it. And I think a big part of that was, as I was watching like the Nuggets win this year, right? Like you're watching the footage from inside the locker room and everyone going crazy, and like reporters putting on the plastic poncho so you don't have like the stuff get ruined, and like no one got to do that. Like none of the reporters went in, so like we're sitting in the hallways, like again throughout all of the COVID playoffs, like you'd get like shuttled in like you were a kindergartner, like hold on to the rope, this is where you can go, this is where you can't go, sit in this room, and once you're done in this room we will walk you to somewhere else with another security guard, because you guys can't just like float around there. So like we're sitting in like the press room, like conducting interviews and all that, and then all of a sudden you like poke your head out in between interviews and you see like Giannis walking by with a cigar, and you see like PJ Tucker all of a sudden has a bottle of something, and you're like, whoa, okay, like can we go down that way? Like, I want to see what's going on, like, in there. That would be great. And so, like, for me, since that didn't happen, I think the parade was kind of when all of it, like, sunk in, that, like, this actually happened, because that wall that had been up, like, with the pandemic and with COVID, kind of got pulled away because we were all outside, and apparently that was okay. So it, like, that to me was when, like, you could actually have those, like, real human interactions once again. Because before that, it was just like, all right, you stay here, the players are gonna be here, and you don't really get to commingle. And to me, it was when the parade happened that was like, okay, yeah, that did actually happen.
He is Eric Nehm of The Athletic. Follow him on Twitter at Eric_Nehm. And of course, you're listening to the Green and Growing podcast. Download it on your Odyssey app, or if you download your favorite podcast app, you can also check us out as we live stream all of these videos, and then they're kept there forever on the Odyssey Sports YouTube page. I'd like to get away from reminiscing, if you don't mind, because we're already about 10 minutes away from wrapping this thing up or so. I saw on The Athletic, I saw your piece on the Summer League going player by player, and God bless you for writing that much on each one of those players, really. But there's also a new power rankings up. I don't know if Amick wrote it or who wrote it, but somebody wrote new power rankings on The Athletic. And Denver is one, and the Bucks are two. And on the write-up of the Bucks, they talk about, really, is there going to be that much of a difference as far as for the Bucks going from Bud to Adrian Griffin's staff? And it got me thinking, like, this is a tough situation. A, he's never been a head coach. B, he's in a situation with a superstar where you're expected to be there because you have a superstar. He's not going to a situation where there's a bunch of really good players and they overachieved one year. Like, no, you have, like, the best player in the NBA or one of the best players in the NBA. So figure it out. You've got two legitimate players next to him. He's kind of in a situation of he can really only get maybe a little bit better, but could possibly get a lot worse depending on what they look like defensively and so forth. He's got two offensive guys in Stotts and Prunty, one former Bucks head coach, one former intern Bucks head coach. That's the weirdest thing I've ever seen in my life covering sports. But do you kind of look at it the same way? Like, yeah, he might make them better, but it's probably not going to be that much better because of how good they really have been.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a tough situation. I think you, at certain points with certain coaches, you're just going to kind of reach the end of their life cycle. Like, the voice doesn't mean as much as it did. And I do think they had kind of reached that point with Mike Budenholzer that, it was 5 years of the exact same thing. And in the modern NBA, 5 years is, I mean, one of the longest tenures you're going to see. Like, that's not how it normally goes. So I do think, like, just the freshness of a new voice, I think, can help out quite a bit. Like, if I'm Adrian Griffin, I'm leaning on pretty heavily, like, hey, remember the first year you had with Mike Budenholzer when you went from, fringe all NBA to MVP? Like, we're going to do a bunch of new stuff this year. We're going to change some things up. And granted, you're not going to go from averaging 30 points per game to 40 points per game. Like, that's not going to happen. But, like, there's going to be enough new, interesting stuff here that you can really take the league by surprise, and you can do some new things, and we're going to change some stuff up. And, like, as you kind of talk about, like, with the personnel, you can only do so much different. But, like, I know it's Summer League, and I know there's a million fouls in Summer League at all times. But Bud teams didn't foul like that in Summer League. And that's not to say fouling's good. But, like, if you're talking about, like, the ideas and how things are going to become different, like, Bud refused to let his teams foul. Like, they weren't going to be that aggressive on the ball. They weren't going to waste that. They believed very much so that you should be low in foul rate. I don't think Adrian Griffin's going to believe that. Like, I don't think that's going to be a core tenet of his defense. So, yeah, they might still play drop coverage with Brook Lopez because that's what you have to play with Brook Lopez, because that is what's going to get you runner up for Defense Player of the Year. But, like, how they pressure on the ball, how they pressure in passing lanes, like, I do think there is a lane there to be very different in that way this season. And then offensively, I think you're always going to be, somewhat tethered to the idea that Giannis can have the ball in his hands quite a bit. Like, that's just, he's been the MVP with the ball in his hands a lot. And I know he's always going to be want to be the desire of, like, let's just have him screen all the time, right? Like just turn him into a screener, turn him into a roll man. That's what he did during the finals run quite a bit, or at least more than he has previously in his career. So I do think it's like getting in some of those ideas. This is a team that hasn't done a lot of dribble handoffs. I think if you watch the playoffs this year, you saw dribble handoffs are one of the easiest ways to create offense for average offensive players. Like if you watch the Miami Heat, you watch the Denver Nuggets, like they run a lot of dribble handoff based offense. So, can Terry Stotts figure out how to add some of that? And can Adrian Griffin then, massage the message in a way that is convincing to Giannis or convincing to Chris or Drew or the whole roster? Like, so I agree that this is a very good team. This is the best team in the league last year, record-wise. This is a team that has championship expectations. Those things aren't changing, but I do think there is, because of the rigidity with which Mike Budenholzer coached and the rigidity of his systems over the last 5 seasons, I do think there is like a real lane to be different than what they were in the past. And there will be many of the same things. Many of the players are going to look the same way because you're going to want them to. They're top 50 players in the NBA. So don't really change the formula too much on them. But I do think they can be different. I don't know if that's a good different. I really don't. Maybe that's a terrible idea and everyone's going to fall out of every game. I don't know. But like, I do think there's a chance to be very different this year and try some new stuff.
Regarding the roster, obviously the big thing right now is, they don't really have a backup point guard and everyone wants to make trades for, getting point guards and stuff. And you had your interview with Horst, which was awesome, by the way. And you brought this up to him and, I know he said that he was happy with where they're at, and he said, he was happy with the secondary ball handlers they have. He brought that up. How much, because people automatically right away go to, well, that's just, he's the GM. He's never going to say that they're going to make a trade. Well, obviously, but I also feel like there's ways to, if you were planning on making a trade, there's different ways to say that without saying anything, where you could just be like, we're going to continue to explore our options, blah, blah, blah. But for him to, in my opinion, for him to say, number one, they're happy with where they're at. And number two, that he brought up the secondary ball handlers. Now he believes that those guys maybe could fill that role. Do you, and you've obviously, been around him, talked to him a lot. Do you put more stock in that when he said it that way? Did you, do you feel that they are really content with what they have and that they're not going to really go too hard after a trade for a backup point guard? Just because I know that's a big thing everyone's, talking about is trying to get a backup point guard.
Yeah, I mean, I think the two questions that I pair up in that interview are that question about backup point guard and then the question I asked about Drew Holiday's playoff performance the last couple of years. And I think where people are concerned about not having a backup point guard or not having someone that takes Drew off the ball a little bit more. I think the big thing in that interview was that when John Horst is thinking about Drew Holiday's workload, he doesn't seem to be thinking about it on the offensive end. Or I shouldn't say be thinking about it. Of course he's thinking about it, but he's not concerned with it on the offensive end. It seems as though the hope is they can take away some of his workload defensively, and then that's going to help him be more efficient offensively and, not have to put in all of the energy on defense that he has in the past. And that will help the offense. So I think when you pair that with like the idea that they're at peace at backup point guard, I think that's what you should be thinking about. And that was kind of how I came away from that interview thinking about it, was that like the concerns over point guard, the concerns over ball handling, like that is something that I think obviously he addressed and understood. Like, yeah, I see why people would be concerned about it, but also the way that we are going to handle it is making Drew's job defensively less difficult. We really believe in Jay Crowder and what he can do. And, he's going to prove it this year. Like, to me, that's the sense that I get. Like, I don't really think they're in a spot where they're actively trying to, trade for another point guard type player or make a big move in that way. And that's not to say they're not looking for moves. Horst has shown year over year, he's very aggressive when it comes to the trade deadline and trying to add that last piece. So it could go terribly for 2 months. And then all of a sudden December comes and they do make that move. But I do think for now, they have a lot of belief in what they do internally. And honestly, I think I'm genuinely curious to see how they use Andre Jackson Jr. I think when you look at what Adrian Griffin has done in Toronto, where they just play a million wings and they don't really care about positions, And you look at what Andre Jackson Jr. did at UConn, where he was their lead ball handler, and he's a weird player. I'm not trying to like say
He can't shoot.
He's going to magically shoot, but I do think they have a lot of belief that, you know, if he can bring the ball up, get into dribble handoffs, and do the unique passing things that he can do, maybe he can help fill that role a little bit. And again, they're going to try it. If it doesn't work, John Horst will get out of it. It's one thing that he learned from John Hammond, maybe better than anything else, is that
John,
if this stuff doesn't work, let's get out of it. Okay, we're going to try DJ Augustine as a true, pure point guard. Okay, that didn't work. Let's get out of it. And I do think if you're talking about Horst and his strengths as a general manager, I think you point to his aggressiveness and the aggressiveness with which he pursues moves and the aggressiveness with which he's willing to get off of a move that isn't working out in the way that they wanted it to.
Jay Crowder better find the fountain of youth if that's going to happen. So we'll see, because I'll believe that when I see it, because Crowder was pissed Bud didn't play him. Bud shouldn't have played him. He looked old. He looked slow. He didn't look good. He didn't deserve to be out there. I sided with Bud with not playing him, so that's a whole nother thing. I rewatched
really quick. I'm sorry. I rewatched Game 5 of the finals the other day, and like Jay Crowder looked so damn good in that game. Like he's dunking, he's hitting all his threes, his defense. I'm like, man, if we had this guy last season, like it makes me upset.
Yeah, no, you didn't have that.
I know you have a question, Sparky, but on Jay Crowder, I will say, I think him signing for the minimum says a lot. I think that says, hey, I recognize that I wasn't good enough last year, and I want to sign up for this team and prove it, and do it. And see, again,
that says nobody else wanted to pay him, Eric. That's what that says. You don't think his agent called around? Everybody's like, well, I don't know, man. I'm not so convinced you're going to get $5 million a year or $10 million a year from us.
All I'm saying is if that was the case, and he could have gotten a minimum anywhere, if he really hated it that much in Milwaukee, he could have gone somewhere else. If he didn't see the path, he could have gone somewhere else. And if the Bucks didn't see a path, they could have gone somewhere else.
Well, they gave up a lot of draft picks. They gotta try this to get from that perspective. Probably
not necessarily. Like you can live with getting rid of 5 second-round picks. That's just the going rate for a player at the trade deadline. Like that's just how it works. Just put together a bunch of seconds, you'll get somebody.
Yeah, I want to talk about one thing in that Horst interview, and we talked about it because we dove into that interview and did a whole podcast on it. I started laughing. And I was like, he's crazy. And I went to my number guys, Nathan Marzion. He started laughing and says, I'll find something. So he went looking during the podcast. I wasn't there when you did the interview, so I don't know if you busted out laughing. But when he makes a comment about, we have a history here of turning, good shooters into elite shooters, or whatever the hell the comment was, something like that, I started laughing. I'm like, what is he talking about? Who is he talking about? More times than not, guys come here and don't shoot as well as they did before they got here. I mean, J.J. Redick wasn't the same player. I can give you a laundry list of guys that came here and had horrible years. And Nathan went and looked. Who did you find? Giannis, maybe?
No, I said, I'm trying
Brooke
to think
Lopez
now.
1 year.
I mean, you guys are thinking way too hard. Like,
well, you could like,
Bobby Portis, Brooke Lopez.
I mentioned those two.
Grayson Allen had the best 3-point shooting season of his career. Like,
oh my God.
If you just like the guys that they bring in to shoot in the 5 to 10 spots on the roster tend to do better. George Hill led the league in 3-point shooting 1 year.
I mentioned Pat and Bobby when he did it, because I said Bobby went to like 48%. Pat went up pretty, but Pat kind of gradually went up, and then Bobby had the one great year, then went back down to earth. And Grayson kind of was a good 3-point shooter before he came here, so I was like, I guess I can't really give him credit
I've never thought of Bobby Portis as elite. I've never thought of George Hill as elite. I've never thought of Pat Connaughton as an elite shooter. I've never thought of any one of those guys as elite shooters. If you want to say, hey, we improve guys when they get here, they become better shooters, okay, fine. But when you start talking about making them elite shooters, now Steph Curry's elite shooter. Ray Allen was an elite shooter. These dudes are nice players.
You're not getting Steph Curry, though. You're not getting Steph Curry.
No, but those are elite shooters is what I'm saying.
Hold on.
These guys are nice players.
Elite shooters can only make the Hall of Fame. Like you're only an elite shooter if you're a Hall of Famer. Like
I think so.
Elite shooter if you score 20 points per game. Like we're talking about role players. Like those guys are elite.
Another one I mentioned, I said nobody thinks of him because obviously in the playoffs it goes down. But Drew was pretty much. I mean, I just pulled up the numbers. He was with the Pelicans. His final 3 years with the Pelicans, 34%, then 33, then 35. He comes here and in the regular season he was 39, 41, 38. But again, obviously people forget about that because he falls off in the playoffs. And you could say that about a few guys where they were really good regular season shooters. They didn't really perform as well in the playoffs, so people don't think of them as great shooters.
I was not prepared for this question, so I don't have it in front of me. But I think Bobby Porter shot 46% from three in the 2020-2021 season, if I remember.
I think it was.
He
48.
read his numbers on the podcast that time when we went over
47. It was 47.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, whether or not you think that's a lead, that's a lead.
Okay, let's talk about Malik Beasley. How does he fit in to this roster?
I mean, I think it's going to be an open competition at shooting guard. Like the starting shooting guard role is going to be up for debate. And I think Grayson Allen's going to have to prove it to a new coach. And I think there's like a real chance that Malik Beasley ends up being the starting shooting guard at the start of the season. And again, maybe you could make the argument that because of his 3-point volume, because of his willingness to, I think he jacks up like 11 threes per 36 minutes for his career. You could say maybe that's better off the bench. And I don't know if I could like argue that. Like you might be right that Beasley's better in that role. But also, you know, I think we've seen a lot of times where Grayson Allen in the playoffs gets run off the line. Teams don't let him get it off. And that doesn't really happen with Beasley. Like he's just such a happy chucker that like it's going to go up. And I do wonder if that is something that when they get to the postseason, they think can be valuable. They think can be like very good for them. I don't know that for sure. But it's going to be an open competition. Like Beasley will be in the conversation for starting shooting guard, and Grayson Allen might beat him in the end.
Marzion, on this podcast all this year, we will never refer to Malik Beasley as Malik Beasley. We will only refer to him as the happy chucker going forward because that is phenomenal. There should be t-shirts, the whole deal. I love it. The happy chucker. I'm a big fan. Yes.
I found the stat. It was, I think over the past 3 seasons, maybe 2, the guys that take the most threes per 36 minutes were Curry, Clay, and him. So, yeah, but to close it out here, I wanted to ask about NBA Twitter's favorite guy, Marzion Beauchamp. What do you, everyone, since he's young and he's exciting and he's kind of that mystery box, I think people just love him and they, you know, want to believe he's going to maximize his potential and turn into the best version he can be. People are saying he should start. People are saying he's, you know, I am kind of the pump the brakes guy on that, where I'm like, okay, he's a 24th overall pick. We've seen, you know, some flashes of good, but also a lot of, you know, pretty bad stuff from him. In the summer league, he wasn't great. He had a couple good games, but he wasn't fantastic. Do you see him having a large role this season if you had to predict right now? Because in my eyes, like, I don't think he's a starter, and I don't think putting him with the starters is necessarily the best for his development. I think it would probably be best to play him 15, 20 minutes off the bench and let him have, you know, handle the ball a little bit, improve that aspect of his game in the regular season when it's not as important. And then if he really does impress you, okay, then, you know, maybe he gets some minutes in the playoffs and can actually help you, you know, potentially win a championship. But I'm looking at this more as another development year for him and not one that I'm expecting him to have a huge role in. But I know a lot of Twitter disagrees.
Yeah, I mean, I think with Marzion, there's just like a couple things to keep in mind. Referencing that interview with Horst, they want to get more athletic and they want to get younger. Like, I know he kind of said, like, you know, young guys tend to be athletic. So I would say we were more after athleticism than necessarily getting younger, but these things go hand in hand. So I think them drafting Marzion last year was not an accident. It wasn't a coincidence that they happened to draft an athletic young guy with that pick last year. They could have gone, you know, a different route and, you know, gotten like a more proven person or someone less athletic that was more skilled. Like those guys tend to be around the end of the first round. And instead they went for someone a little bit more unproven that flashed a little bit more athleticism in Marzion. And they did it again with Andre Jackson this year. Like that is like a very clear priority. And I think that means he's going to get a chance. I don't know if that means he's going to be ready for that chance. I think to me, if you watch his summer league play, I think what was really exciting was how much he got to the free throw line in those first 2 games where he was fantastic. And yeah, game 3, 0 for 5, scoreless, not great. In game 4, I think he's scoreless in the first half, ends the game with 11 points. Like when you're thinking through kind of his performance and what he's about, I just think like the idea that he's put on probably another 10 pounds in the last year, the idea that like, I thought last year when he played too much, it was step back jumpers in threes. And if you are going to be one of the young athletic pieces, you need to show off the youth and the athleticism. And to me, those first 2 games in Summer League were exciting for that reason, because he showed off, like, I can use my body and get to the line. I can use my body and finish at the rim. Like, those are the things to me, like, if you're talking about how he stays on the floor, those are the things that he has to do. And we'll see, you know, with the added strength and added weight, if he can still defend 2s and 3s. I think the Bucks wanted someone that was young and athletic. And, you know, after that draft last year, we were talking about him covering 3s and 4s. And I think the thing that I found most surprising during his rookie season was, like, he was covering 1s and 2s. Like, he was chasing point guards around screens. He was chasing shooting guards around, and he showed off the foot speed and kind of like the hip flexion to be able to pull that off. And that, to me, is an exciting development. Like, the Bucks don't have someone like that. So I think he's going to get his chances. I just don't know if everything that he does on the offensive end is going to be consistent enough to get playing time.
Sparky? Is Sparky there? I don't even know if he's still there.
Well, he kind of looks frozen.
Yeah, I think he is. All right, well. Are we back? What just happened?
I don't know. I think we're done. Maybe.
Sparky, are you there? I just saw him blink. I swear. He's blinking right now.
I'm here, but.
Oh, he's back. Nope, he's gone again.
We're just gonna have to cut this part out, but yeah.
Oh,
I'm trying to. You're muted now, Sparky. Just in case you didn't see that. All right, he left. He's gonna come back in. For real though, appreciate everything you do, Eric. You're awesome at what you do.
I really appreciate it.
I saw you actually. I remember seeing you when we were going to Boston for Game 7, and you were on the same flight as me, I believe. And I was like, "Oh, that's Eric Nehm." I was gonna come say hi, and then like right as I was about to go say hi, we were like boarding the flight. So I was like, "Okay, I'm not gonna like bother him on this flight." So
yeah, my guess was I probably had just pulled the hood over my head and like tried to go to sleep because I was not sleeping a lot during the playoffs.
Yeah, and that Game 7 was not fun, but
that was a rough one.
So do you think? And I mean, I don't know. I'm still of the Bud philosophy mindset. Or sorry, Sparky's back.
Oh, yeah, it's no big deal. You might as well keep talking. Everything froze on my side. I literally closed out the internet and was going to go home. I'm like, well, I better open it up back up and see. And you guys are still talking without me here. So, yeah, go ahead.
We were just having a side conversation. It wasn't even part of the thing anymore.
Oh, okay, fine then. All right, that'll do it for Green and Growing. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.